Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. As-salatu was-salamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa mawala. Thank you, Sister Jamia, and shukran to Imam Rashid for inviting me to share with you some of the some conversation on some of the aspects of Imam Ghazali's thoughts and ideas from this book titled Kitab al-Sharh Ajaib al-Qalb. Sharh Ajaib al-Qalb means an elaboration on the marvels of the heart. And now we're doing chapter 8, 9, and 10. And this is a very interesting chapter because now we're going to get into what we would say the meat of the matter, so to speak. There'll be a lot of interesting aspects. Was there going to be somebody who's going to respond today, Imam Rashid? Wahid Sukun, I think you told me.
That's correct.
I don't see him here. I think people are preparing for Eid, so let's just let people be happy and let them do the work of Eid, inshallah. Next slide, please. So I think what we are trying to do in this chapter is that how Imam Ghazali, because in these three chapters, what Imam Ghazali is doing is to convince us that there is a dimension to knowing that is not only cognitive and discursive knowledge. In other words, is not only about what the mind and the brain tells us, or rational sources tell us what we know or as we know it, but there's a whole different dimension that he is going to elaborate in detail that he thinks is also a source of knowing and a source of a very important knowledge that we ignore at our peril. And this obviously is a difficult question in a time in the modern world where we no longer have the sensibility of having knowledge of a spiritual, a divine kind. And so it, for some people, might have difficulty in grasping that. Imam Ghazali's main argument is that he bases much of his argument from this verse of the Quran, مَا يَفْتَحِ اللَّهُ لِلنَّاسِ مِنْ رَحْمَةٍ فَلَا مُمْسِكَ لَهَا وَمَا يُمْسِكْ فَلَا مُرْسِلَ لَهُ مِنْ بَعْدِ وَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ. That whatever Allah grants people out of mercy, none can withhold it. And whatever Allah withholds, no one else can deliver. Again, it plays on that theme that we had, or the question that was asked last week: what is the Mashiach of Allah? What is Allah's will? What is Allah's design for us? And this is a question of divine design. That divine design operates according to certain principles in which Allah is sovereign in the operation of their principles. So when Allah grants people out of mercy, no one can withhold. And whatever Allah withholds, no one else can deliver. Allah is the Almighty, the epitome of wisdom. This is the foundation for Ghazali's claim of knowledge by inspiration, knowledge by ilham. And inspiration, I will elaborate the two aspects of it in a minute. But what is important here is that while Ghazali doesn't give this verse in this section, but in the earlier section, he had given this verse, and he keeps on referring when it comes to knowledge and God giving us that knowledge, that extra dimension of knowledge. He categorizes that extra dimension as rahmah, as mercy. So he sees all these gifts, these hidden gifts of knowledge and learning, he sees that as part of Allah's mercy unto humanity. And those who are fortunate, the awliya Allah and the prophets and so on, they are the recipients of this. And that is part of the divine mercy. And we can understand that when we do see that وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. When the Prophet ﷺ is identified as someone who is viewed as the one who epitomizes mercy, and we have not dispatched you, O Muhammad, but as a mercy unto all the worlds, to all peoples, to all inhabitants of these worlds. And so prophecy is a form of mercy, but at the core of prophecy is knowledge of another dimension, knowledge of another angle that is not always accessible to us. So that's what the next slide will say, is that, conceptions of knowledge that Ghazali talks about. He says that knowledge is acquired in two ways, right? We acquire knowledge through, we deduce certain things. We make conclusions. We say, this is smaller than this, or than this, right? The smaller number. So we make those kinds of deductions, istidlal. We are told through teaching, study, that we learn certain things. We learn our ABCs from teachers and parents. A lot of things are passed on to us. So it's not only study, but also things that are given to us via tradition. And we also reflect. In other words, if someone says 1 + 1, then we make the conclusion that it could amount to 2. So we've engaged in a certain amount of reflection. We add to it. We build a bridge between one idea and another idea. That is called reflection. That is called Atibar. Atibar means to build a connection between one idea and another idea. And when you build that, Atibar, the word Atibar in Arabic comes from the root word abara, which means to cross over. A bridge is called a ma'bar. A bridge is called a place that you cross over. So when you make connections between thoughts, ideas, it's called Atibar. And you also get ideas from intensive forms of perception, istibsar. So istibsar from basira. كل هذه سبيل أدعو إلى الله على بصيرة. Say this is my path. O Muhammad, say هذه سبيلي. This is my path. I invite people to Allah على بصيرة, that is filled with deep forms of perception and insight. Okay, so these are the kinds of types of knowledge that are cognitive, deductive, and so on. And we give them the title, we say this is acquired knowledge. Al-ilm al-muktasab, acquired knowledge. And the second level, and this is what this chapter is all about, these chapters are all about, is knowledge that is inspirational, driven by higher forms of consciousness, I would argue. I think consciousness is the big thing. For me, at least. Other people might disagree with me, but I think consciousness is the important thing, and that is inspiration, ilham, and that is what ordinary people and those people who are reached a high level of spiritual proficiency, they receive inspiration and ilham in their hearts, in their minds. And then there's a special category of that type known as wahi, prophets who receive revelation. And that is fairly authoritative. And because that is provided to prophets through a guaranteed channel, through a channel that is, you see, the channel that we might receive ilham could sometimes be, that ordinary mortals could sometimes be interfered with. Because the Quran also says that even the prophets, there is not a Nabi, there is not a prophet, nor a Rasul, a messenger. You know, the difference between a Nabi and a Rasul. A Nabi is someone who doesn't come with a big kind of, with a big code of law or a big framework, just continues the work of a previous prophet or previous Rasul rather. That's the way the Muslim tradition talks about that. And so, but even the prophets, when they receive their wahi, Satan tries to interfere with it. Satan tries to interfere with it. Now, this kind of knowledge, the central recipient, the central place, I don't even want to call it an organ because it's not the organ, but the location is the heart. Heart is the center of this kind of knowledge. In fact, the heart is also, at some level, the recipient of the first kind of knowledge, because you use your brain, things get internalized, and then you feel it. And the Muslim tradition always says that it becomes certainty. You acquire certainty in your heart. So even your discursive knowledge, that the cognitive forms, you get certainty of it in your heart. But the second kind is where the heart plays the most important role, and we will talk about that in a minute. So that is called knowledge by presence. Ilm al-ladunni or al-ilm al-huduri. Knowledge by presence. In other words, knowledge by divine presence, knowledge offered by divine presence. Or divine or angelic presence is always there because the angel acts on behalf of the Creator. Now, there are two kinds of ways of thinking about this. That the recipient of this kind of knowledge does not know how this knowledge came into the heart, nor is the individual aware of the source of this knowledge, this acquisition. But experiences as an inbreathing in the heart. Nafath fi ruh. The book mistranslated and says raw. Raw is just the opposite. Raw is fear. It is ruh. So please correct it in your book. When it says nafath fi raw, no, that's not the raw is fear, anxiety. This is inbreathing in. When you say ruh in Arabic means the heart, the mind. Okay, so when there's an inbreathing in the heart, that's when you get one type. The other type, where the recipient does know the source of this knowledge, either through a vision of an angel, in the case of the Prophet ﷺ, which was Jibreel, and that we call revelation. Now, I mean, there could be other forms of, ways that the Prophet received revelation. Might not always have been Jibreel. It could have also been that the Prophet gets this directly. He gets the ideas or the thoughts in his heart straight away. And that is also known as wahi because of the status of the recipient. That recipient has a guaranteed channel to Allah. Or even if error takes place in a transmission, it gets corrected according to the tradition. But there's someone who gets ilham, there's no guarantee that that it will be corrected. And therefore, Ghazali has many concerns about that. And therefore, he wants you to have a solid platform in the knowledge of the tradition so that you do not make the kind of massive flaws in your understanding. Now, remember, Ghazali said earlier in the earlier chapter, I'm just reminding you of things, that those things that make the heart destitute, those things that obstruct the heart, just reminding you. So he says when someone is very, very young, that the person, that heart of that young person is still imperfect. So there's a natural imperfection. Sometimes there's dullness in the heart due to disobedience, when we do not follow and comply to the moral norms offered by God or by society. Third, when the heart is out of focus from true reality. Yes, you have a fairly bright heart, but you are distracted by your day-to-day activities, and therefore you are out of focus. You are distracted. And remember, we spoke there about Ghazali says sometimes even some of your minor religious preoccupations distract you, and that's where you don't focus on the main thing, is to gain proximity and qurba, proximity to Allah. The fourth is a veil. The veil is a veil that we make a decision that we want to have that veil. Remember that he says you're a very obedient person and you're a very disciplined person, because no light enters the heart, because you're attached to a certain kind of authority. You take your knowledge from some authorities, and that authority does not have insight. That authority is not an authority who's giving you real wisdom and insight. And with the result that you are going to be veiled because of the kinds of choices you made, of who are going to be your informants and who are going to be your teachers. And therefore, I don't know if I told you on a previous occasion, Ghazali says that when you follow any person, anyway, you must do some amount of due diligence, and you must do some amount of research, and you must make some amount of inquiry about, why am I following this teacher? Did I make a due diligence, and did I do research on the different kinds of people that are available to me? And for him, he says, for the layperson, that is your ijtihad. That is your ijtihad. In other words, you're going to use your mental and rational faculties to make some inquiry to determine X is better than Y, or this person is a person of greater wisdom. He says, just as you go into a town and you're looking for the right physician for you, and there are dozens of physicians, you're going to ask around, which one is doing what. You're going to make some inquiries. You're going to read some, customer reports and stuff, right? Like we have today. Before we buy, some goods, we look around for what the customer reports are, or you ask for some references and so on. Similarly, it says, in the pursuit of knowledge, you must find somebody who is going to give you the right kind of advice, and you want to look for someone whose teachings are going to be enlightening. And the fifth one, Ghazali reminded us in the previous occasion, ignorance of the source from which knowledge is drawn. In other words, and that's what he said earlier, in the Ilham, the knowledge by inspiration, that you can go you can become misguided if you don't have a foundation of knowledge of the tradition, of the how the sages and the hukama and how they teach us. You must have that foundation, because what you are going to do, you want to solve the unknown with the help of the known. And if you don't have a foundation of the knowledge, then your efforts to solve the unknown with the help of the known will be fruitless, because you don't know what is the known. So how are you going to get to the unknown? So you need to have a good control of the known, and be steeped in it, and be knowledgeable of it, and then you can go to the next level. So that's what he's trying to tell us there. And then the key thing, so he says that these 5 points that I just mentioned in the previous slide, they obstruct between the human heart and the preserved tablet. Al-Lawh al-Mahfuz, the preserved tablet. Because Ghazali now introduces for us a cosmological dimension, something that is symbolic. We cannot touch it, we haven't seen it, but we get it on authority of the Prophet ﷺ. And the preserved tablet is the source of all knowledge. And ideally what you want is that the mirror of the preserved tablet, that mirror reflects on the mirror of your heart. Right? So therefore you need to keep the mirror of your heart, must keep it polished and keep it clean. And how does one polish the mirror of the heart? Can anybody remember? Anybody want to type it in the chat? How does one maintain the heart? By dhikr. By dhikr. That's right. By remembrance of Allah. Good to see Wahid Sukul has arrived. How does one polish the mirror of the heart? By doing frequently of the dhikrullah, remembrance of Allah, and that will allow us to do that. So it's not only that, but also our conduct, right? You must have a certain kind of conduct. Because remember, Ghazali said that the heart can be dull, and the dullness is produced by disobedience, by not following the commandments, right? So you can do as much dhikr as you want, but if your actions and your conduct is not correct, there could be problems, right? You might not get the clear light. It might be shaded light that you're getting, or you will not be able to read the inspiration properly, because your mirror has been darkened by disobedience. So this is important to keep in mind. These how Ghazali thinks about the preserved tablet as a reflection. Yes. Now, how does the light reflect on the heart? So he says, he gives you an analogy. The analogy is that in real life, if you have there are two mirrors and your window is slightly open, sometimes if you want these two mirrors to reflect, and give you different angles of two mirrors, if you have it in front of you, or you keep it at different angles, that mirror can be up. You won't be able to see anything if your curtain or a veil, because of a light wind, goes between those two mirrors, then you won't be able to see anything, right? So that is what he's saying. And what will have to be done is that you'll have to remove the veil or the curtain by the human hand, or a strong breeze will blow it away, or you have to do something to it, or the breeze will put it in between, right? But now he's saying sometimes the breeze also comes and removes the removes the veil between the two mirrors. He says, similarly, the winds of divine favor blow and remove the veils on the eyes of the heart. That is beautiful. The winds of divine favor. Remember, Ghazali said that all of this goes back to rahmah, to mercy from Allah. To get this level of insight, you must be able to attain and be the recipient of Allah's mercy. And that is the winds of divine favor, the winds of divine mercy helps us to remove the veils on the eyes of the heart. And then the reflection from the divine tablet will reach the heart. Sometimes you get this light in your sleep. You get this light from the preserved tablet in your sleep. In other words, through you wake up and you have a strong inspiration, you had a dream, the dream tells you those things. But also in your waking hours, you get some secrets from Allah. During your waking hours, you receive secrets. And these are flashes, momentary. These are not permanent states. These are momentary flashes. These are tajalliyat. These are what we call divine self-manifestation. It comes for a mega or a nanosecond, but it's not the permanent state. If it's a permanent state, you'll be an angel. So it comes in small flashes. But this is what all the seekers in the path of Allah are always hoping and wishing for, that they will get a moment of that divine flash, and they will be in a state of intoxication and heightened awareness of things around them, and also the recipients of extraordinary wisdom. And so this is what it is. Now, how does this communication and the details of how does the preserved tablet transmit to the heart? Those details are not given, right? And that's only Ghazali would not even go in here. He was quite hesitant to even share this in this book of his. He was saying, this is a book that is dealing with the ilm al-muamala, with transactional things. really, I shouldn't be doing this thing here, but let me just do it, he's saying, because he thinks that so this is interesting. Normally, you will hear, and if you share this with any of your teachers, your regular teachers back home, wherever you are, they will immediately tell you, these kinds of things that you just heard in these classes with Moosa is not for everybody. And these are not for lay people in particular. Some people will completely keep you away from this, because some people might then, some people might just say, hey, I saw a dream last night and this dream telling me this, and I'm now going to, announce myself as a mulham. I have received inspiration. First of all, those who receive inspiration, they don't talk. They don't talk about it. They don't share it with anybody. Okay, that's the first lesson. And Ghazali in his other work will tell you that once you begin talking about this, then you basically stroking your own ego. Then you did not get a divine flesh. You got a satanic flesh, not an angelic flesh. Okay, so you keep this very much to yourself. So if you go and share this with people, Ghazali himself was hesitant. Some people will discourage you from this. So therefore, I would advise you to try and understand this as best you can, and keep it to yourself, because many people will say that if you don't have proper guidance. Yes, if you have a proper sheikh, if you have a spiritual guide, then the spiritual guide will walk you that path. And Ghazali, what I was trying to say is that Ghazali wants to share this with a lay audience, hoping that they will take the next step and confine themselves a spiritual guide, because he's giving them a little bit of a kind of a foretaste, a little bit of an appetizer, what this experience could be if you have the right kind of guidance. So therefore, he included it here because he thinks some good could come out of this. And so you are basically a recipient of Ghazali's appetizer for the marvels of the heart, because all the stories he tells later on, the kind of wisdom and insight people have are quite significant, and you will begin to see and enjoy that story. So remember the tajalliyat. And so when we move to the next slide, how does one engage in spiritual striving? So if Ghazali is giving an appetizer, he's also telling you what this is going to involve. And so you have to think carefully if you want to go along this path. Do you have the fortitude? Do you have what it takes to go on this path? Right? So first of all, it involves isolation and withdrawal. You have to do khalwa. And in this khalwa, he explains at length, as you've read, that you have to do dhikrullah, a lot of remembrance of Allah. And you have to do remembrance of Allah in such a manner that when you don't utter the name of Allah, that name will be engraved on your tongue. And at some point, it will become so intense that divine name will be engraved on your heart. And when it's engraved on your heart, then without you moving your tongue, your heart itself will basically pulse with that name, pulse with the divine name. So that's what you're looking for. You're looking for the pulsations of the divine name in your heart and in your soul. And now you are not anymore confused when I say heart and your soul. You know it's the same thing. What the spiritual striving will take, you have to abandon worldliness. You can't be too involved in the world because it's going to distract you. Remember on the 5 distractions that Ghazali spoke about earlier on, one of the things that he said, you might have a bright heart, but you're so preoccupied with other things. So the other also, one of those 5 points you mentioned, avoid blameworthy deeds. Strive to imprint awareness of Allah in the heart. and you're hoping for that flash. Now he says that, some of the theologians think, or they consider it improbable or difficult that you will get this flash. So he's making the distinction between theologians, and I already preempted this argument earlier, that if you go to Muslim theologians now, wherever you are, and you talk to them about this, they're going to say, no, be careful, okay? If they are smart, they will say, go find yourself a proper sheikh that will teach you the life of the heart. If they are not smart, they will just discourage you and leave you disheartened. So the other thing is that Ghazali says, he gives a good example. He says the heart of the believer fluctuates more frequently than a boiling pot. So he's possibly thinking of a boiling pot and how the boiling goes and so on. So what he's saying is the word qalb itself means fluctuation. The heart fluctuates. Therefore, the heart goes, when you get intense, when you get anxious, when you get happy, the heart beats faster. That's the whole idea of the heart. It is the place that you can emotionally feel the sensations pulsating through you. And so you're all the time looking for things, you want to understand things, and so on and so forth. So this is what Ghazali is trying to make us aware of, that to have a heart that is all the time alert, and you're always seeking and trying to find, because that's the nature of the heart. Qalb is that it's always fluctuating. And the revolution is inqilab, from the same root word, where you turn things upside down, right? Inqilab. Or turn back. فَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ. What they will turn back onto. It's a verse of the Quran. Okay. More on spiritual striving. In the next slide, it says that if the Sufi had knowledge, the search could be expedited, and the confusion in his or her vision, I should have be inclusive there, in her vision or in her imagination, would be eliminated. Okay, so if the person on the spiritual path, including the master, had a good foundation in knowledge, remember the knowledge of the first kind, al-ilm al-muktasab, the kind of grounding that gives you a common understanding with your entire community, then this is what Ghazali says, you must have that knowledge. And if the Sufi has that knowledge, then the confusion in the Sufi's vision or the imagination, that confusion will be addressed. It will be eliminated. And so some people, Ghazali says, well, why are you telling us that we need to have knowledge? Why do we need to have knowledge of the tradition? In other words, knowledge of the commandments, the fiqh. The Prophet did not study fiqh. The Prophet just got the revelation straight into his heart. Why can't we get it? So Ghazali is saying, he totally disagrees. He said, you need to have that foundational knowledge. He says, it's like giving up farming, and you're digging up your farm hoping to find the treasure on your farm. He said, I think if Ghazali had my kind of language, he would say, that is stupid. Don't do stupid, right? Don't do stupid. So, because if you plant things on your farm, you will get a harvest. But if you have this weird idea that, one farmer somewhere was digging around and he got the treasure on his farm, and that's all that you want, then you don't have to work. Ghazali says that is totally unacceptable. You have to do that once you are grounded in knowledge of the tradition. Now we come to the next discussion of in the next slide, the cognitive knowledge versus hard knowledge. Just further elaboration of what we said at the outset: cognitive knowledge and heart knowledge. I call it heart knowledge. ilham. He gives you two analogies. And I think one of the ways to understand Ghazali is to think about think with his analogies. This sense, he says, imagine a pool of water, and this pool is dug out in the ground, and then from everywhere, small rivulets, tributaries, are pouring water into the pool. Okay, this is the cognitive knowledge. This is the knowledge of the tradition that you're acquiring. It pours the knowledge into this basin, into this pool. Okay, so that is sensory cognitive knowledge of the tradition. Everybody can access that. It will gather in a place, comes from different sources. But heart knowledge is different from sensory and cognitive knowledge. And he gives you two analogies. The first analogy is that the same pool of water, but this time the pool is not nourished from tributaries and the rivulets that flow underneath. But what happens is that there's a gushing spring at the bottom of the pool. There's a spring there. And this spring keeps on feeding the pool of water. Right? This is heart knowledge. This is knowledge stemming from within the heart. And if I ask you the question, but I've already given it away, where does the heart get it from? The heart is clean enough because it gets it now as a reflection from the preserved tablet. Right? From the divine. So this gushing spring is the divine has opened up a spring in your heart. And you've been a beneficiary of an enormous generosity and an enormous rahmah, mercy from God when you get there. There's another way that Ghazali also talks about that. He says, think of an engineer. So let me maybe finish this. The other one is the Byzantine versus the Chinese artist analogy that he gives. He says that there was a competition between the Byzantine artists and Chinese artists. Each one of them was to draw a picture on a big wall. And there was a curtain dividing the two teams who are entered into the competition. The Byzantine artists, they are very, very adept and they're very skilled with colors. And they use a range of colors and they make a very, very beautiful picture on the canvas on their side. Remember, the two teams are separated. There's a screen between them. The Chinese artists, all they do is that they are scrubbing and cleaning the screen on which they are painting. They are scrubbing the surface on which they're supposed to paint. And they're making that surface their painting site. They're making it so luminous. And when the competition is now, when the judges come to now give a verdict on whose painting is better, people open up the Byzantine, wall where there's a picture, and people are enormously impressed. It's really, really beautiful. And when they open up the Chinese artist's wall, they see that the Byzantine artist's picture is reflected in that blank wall in even more luminous and more and greater splendor. And most people then say that one is the better picture. But it is that original, that picture that is reflected on that empty wall. What Ghazali is saying is that if your heart is clean, if your heart is purified, if your mirror is not darkened, you will be able to see the true reality of things with greater insight and wisdom and clarity. That's what he's saying. One of the things that Ghazali repeatedly talks about here, he's talking about things and he says, the true reality of things, the true reality of things. And so he gives you an example. He says, think of an engineer who has a plan and he draws up a plan and then transforms the plan into a building. Those people who are in construction understand as well. So too, Allah has a plan that is realized in reality, but it works off a design. It works off a plan, and the plan is the preserved tablet. And once if an image, any image, transforms into sensory experiences, an image then goes in, is part of an imagination, any sensory image that we have. And then when we close our eyes, we can recall that image in our memory. And so memory reproduces the original thing. This is where Ghazali gets a little bit into the weeds and the details of the next, what is on the next slide. And that is that it is the importance of the memory and the importance of imagination. Because Ghazali is very, very keen to make us understand the importance of the imagination. The imagination and the memory works together. Khayal is, and remember this word khayal because I'm going to give you a poem by Ghalib, where it talks about khayal, the imagination. And the imagination is also crucial. So when you, it's the memory that when you do recall, it's the memory that reproduces a world from the heart. And it's at that point that you grasp the true reality of things. When you can think about a thing that you have seen, an image you have seen, an idea that you have, and when you think about it deeply, with greater sophistication and so on, you're recalling that from your heart, and that's where every time you get a greater detail and more subtlety to understand what is the true reality of a thing. Think back of experiences that you have had or things that you have learned 20 years ago and where you are right now in your life, and how what you learned then or knew then somehow through maturity, through greater knowledge, is also what you now understand that better, maybe differently from what you understood it originally. Now, Ghazali says, what you have now grasped in your heart corresponds to what was grasped in the imagination. Remember, he said, sensory experience, imagination, memory, right? So the imagination, khayal is the thing that captures it, okay? And what is acquired in the imagination? What is acquired in the imagination corresponds to the world outside there. What is acquired in the imagination corresponds to the world outside. It should be corresponds. And the world out there, as we perceive it, corresponds to the Lawh Mahfuz. it is basically the plan or the transcript or the design that is copied from the Lawh Mahfuz. Okay? From the divine, from the preserved tablet. So see how when we think about this, and unfortunately, this aspect of our thinking, because of our complete preoccupation with finding the right text and understanding the text so simplistically, this vocabulary of understanding with the heart, understanding with imagination, understanding in communion and conversation with the Lawh Mahfuz, with the preserved tablet, this literacy is kind of rapidly disappearing from our societies. Rapidly disappearing. And sometimes, an experience with a bad experience with a sheikh will make people disappointed with that, and people completely then leave that tradition, or and no longer interested in that, or people become agnostic, or the teacher that you followed, you somehow got disappointed with that teacher, then you leave that off, or there's too much of a preoccupation on those issues that are not really the essence of things. It's basically the husk, as Ghazali would say. So much of our religious literacy today is all about the husk and not about the true reality of things, the truth, right? So this is the appetizer Ghazali is giving us, that try and understand what is the truth in itself. So now Ghazali introduces in the next slide the degrees of existence, the degrees of existence in the world. So he says, there's existence in the preserved tablet. That's the cosmic existence. So Ghazali now gives us the various shades of existence, the various gradations of existence, of wujud, of existence, of being in the world. You see, sometimes we think that this word being in the world, in order to understand being, we need to read Heidegger. No, you don't have to. You just need to have an imagination and say that when you are in the world, that is your being. You are in the world, being in the world. But being in the world means that you're also in contact with other dimensions of existence, right? You know that the fabric of the cosmos has a certain shape. You know that, not that you can see it, but through certain forms of learning, right? Through advanced and quantum physics. You know that things fall to the ground because of a certain force called gravity, right? So these are all different dimensions of existence. They impact you. So one is my physical existence. Yes, that's I'm in the world, but I'm in constant communication with other dimensions of my existence, of my being in the world. So one of that is existence in the preserved of the cosmic existence. Before one's corporeal existence, that already pre-existed. Then there is something called true existence. And that is when you, in other words, where things might have its real, and this is more Platonic idea, its perfect form somewhere, right? So we're always trying to understand the perfect forms of things. Therefore, Ibn Arabi talks about the perfect human being, right? Al-insan al-kamil. We're always striving for that perfection. An artist strives for perfection. A teacher strives for perfection. A someone who is an artisan strives for perfection, right? It is that trying to get the true existence of things, the haqiqah of things, right? We engage in our prayers, we engage in all activities. We want to do it with certain kind of excellence, right? That is, we're trying to strive. What makes us reach that excellence is this seeking for the true existence of something, some idea. Ghazali doesn't have that. I put in green there that at some point you have bodily, your corporeal existence. And once you have your bodily or your corporeal existence, then there's because of you are embodied, there's an imaginative existence, right? Now you have imagination. And then that imagination then helps you have an intellectual existence, the image in your heart. the image in your heart that you recall, that makes you strive to get the true existence of things. So for instance, you are an artisan, you're wonderful, you have great skill in building things out of wood, right? So you design something, you made the thing, you made the object. Next, so what you have in your heart, you have that intellectual existence, you have the knowledge of how to make this object in your heart. Next time you're going to do it, you're going to do the idea that you want to do and repeat it and make it exactly the same, or make it better, or make it somewhat different. You're trying to find different dimensions of the true existence of that thing. Where does this striving for betterment, improvement come from? It comes from the different dimensions of our existence. These are very subtle things. We hardly have time in our education, hardly teaches us how to navigate the dimensions of our existence. We're not given this in school, nor are we given this in Sunday school, nor are we given this in advanced classes elsewhere. And therefore, this literacy is completely absent. And I hope that some of you will pursue this seeking outside, beyond this class, in the months and years that lie ahead. Because there's a real, very, a lot to learn from there, and a whole number of veils will be lifted from your eyes to begin to see things in greater complexity. This is true complexity. When you say things are complex, this is true complexity. If you can begin to see the different shades of things, we can see the different aspects of things. And then the next slide would talk to us about how our existence is. Our existence is a combination of spiritual, or what we will call immaterial existence, combined to our corporeal existence, our bodily existence. And these mixtures come in different strengths, in various strengths. And what I just said earlier, this level of complexity and sophistication, divine kindness, lutf, makes you see an enormous world through the pupil of your eye, a very big world. Ghazali says you can see this through that small hole in your eye, right? You can see large things, enormous things, you can see it. This is what Ghazali is trying to tell us. And therefore, remember, I said it is all this learning is rahmah. Remember, he also taught us in weeks before, Ghazali told us that even, what was that? The amana, the amana, which we always translate as responsibility, but you don't become responsible just because you become responsible. That there's a drive behind responsibility. Therefore, the amana is knowledge. When Allah says we offered the amana to the mountains, to the heavens and to the earth, and they all trembled and they withdrew, said, we don't want it, we can't do this. But human beings took it. What was that amana? That responsibility is preceded by knowledge of what that responsibility is. The ma'rifah, the ilm. That's why Allah taught Adam the names of things first, right? So this is the idea of knowledge, and so divine kindness is by Allah giving you knowledge. Connections to what there's also, it gives you connections to the immaterial world and allows you, when you begin to understand the various dimensions and shades of existence, you begin to see, experience different kinds of experiences of the heart in dreams and in visions, right? And therefore, for Ghazali, dreams are very, very important. And all this can be aided, what Ghazali says, the mufarridun, those who are unique, who remember Allah through dhikr all the time. Okay. And we've talked about that earlier. So why that we always strive to become the mufarridun, those who are unique, for whom the dhikr is on their tongues and later on gets engraved onto their hearts. Then Ghazali talks about the heart that has two doors. One door opens to the world of the spirit, to the prophets and saints, and the other door to the senses, right? So our heart here has two doors: to the knowledge that comes from the prophets and the saints, and the other door of our senses, which he says is that of the philosophers and theologians. And therefore he says one of the marvels of the world of the heart, or the wonders, the ajib things, the kind of one wonders, it leaves us to wonder and reflect and think, is that the world of the heart wavers between the visible and the invisible worlds, right? This wavering, this fluctuation between the visible and the invisible. Therefore, to think that you're always going to remain in the invisible world is somewhat of a delusion, because you're embodied. So you always are wavering between the visible and the invisible world. The next slide, I've already explained how Ghazali, in the second example, talks about this state of the heart and knowledge of the heart, the art of the Byzantine versus Chinese painters, and how the Chinese painters just basically cleaned their surface so they could basically find the perfect reflection of all the true reality, a true reality of things, and so on. And so the color of the heart reflects the different colors. The clarity of the heart reflects the different colors. The clarity of the heart would also be able to bring you the subtlety of the different colors, and the different colors are the different dimensions of existence. And knowledge that is embedded in the heart, this is a little bit of repetition, but I'm trying to remind you, remember the spring inside the pool, not water coming from outside, but think of that spring gushing at the bottom of the pool. That is where your heart itself produces knowledge. And then he says, that the distinction that we have in knowledge in this world, in the hereafter, we will be recalled by our levels of distinction. We will be submitting ourselves to our Creator by the levels of distinction we acquired in this world. So you want to be in the front row, you don't want to be in the back rows, right? So if you want to do that, work on the heart. And those are the levels of those who have knowledge of Allah, those who have ma'rifah of Allah. And when you have ma'rifah of Allah, there's a possibility that you can be a muhaddath, the one who is divinely addressed. God speaks to their mind or their heart. God speaks to their ruh. Unfortunately, the book has a mistake by calling it the muhaddith. Muhaddith is someone who transmits hadith. It's muhaddath, and the plural is muhaddathun. Okay? And the Prophet ﷺ said that every community has a muhaddath, and the muhaddath in our community is Umar. Umar is the one, and Allah speaks to Umar's heart and to his soul. And therefore, Umar is so wonderfully remembered that on many occasions, some of his ijtihad and some of his insights became the insight that the revelation confirmed or the Prophet confirmed, and so on. But Umar is also sometimes, he also had some embarrassing moments, and he said, when he disagreed with the Prophet at the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, and he said, I can never wash off that day of my lack of respect, and so on. So this is when that spring at the base of the pool is gushing with lots of knowledge. Knowledge of the heart continues. It gives you wisdom and insight. And the true dimensions is tafqih, understanding, that is really intense understanding, and ta'wil. When you have that understanding, you can gain, you can do the possibility of putting complex things together, that they begin to talk to each other, and you have the ability to do ta'wil. Like Nabi Yusuf, you could do ta'wilul ahadith. He could do interpretation of stories, right? You gain a comprehensive understanding. And this is attained through knowledge from presence or by means of divine presence, ilm al-ladunni. And this comes from the story of Nabi Moosa and Dhikr. So the word ladun comes from the Quran. فَوَجَدَا عَبْدًا مِنْ عِبَادِنَا آتَيْنَاهُ رَحْمَةً مِنْ عِنْدِنَا وَعَلَّمْنَاهُ مِنْ لَدُنَّا إِلْمًا. Mark the word rahmah and mark the word ladunna. So when Moses and his servant, they are going and marching and trying to find this person, the two found one of my devotees. They found the green man. They found the wise man. They found Dhikr. And who is Dhikr? One on whom we had bestowed mercy. Remember, Ghazali is always talking about this knowledge is mercy from Allah. And we have taught knowledge from us, knowledge from ladunna. Therefore, we have the category of ilm ladunni. A couple of, so the next slide gives you a number of stories. I don't know what we're doing on time. Imam Rashid is about until 11:15, right? So I got a few slides. I'm almost done. He tells the story of, you've read it, and there are many stories, but experiences. He talks about Sayyidina Abu Bakr. Sayyidina Abu Bakr, as he is before he died, he says to Aisha that these are your two brothers and your two sisters. And she was the only sister at the time. She was the only daughter. And what that meant is that Abu Bakr's wife was pregnant at the time, and Abu Bakr could predict that he was going to have another daughter. And therefore Aisha was surprised, and her mother gave birth to another daughter, right? So this is knowledge of the heart. So what Ghazali is saying, Abu Bakr and all these people had this. Omar had the same experience, right? I already said that Omar is the muhaddath. He's well known. Anas bin Malik also tells an interesting story about his experiences. That he enters into the presence of Uthman, and Uthman had this character, and Uthman said to him, he says, and Anas bin Malik says, as he was coming to Uthman, he saw a beautiful woman, and he basically, gave a lot of attention and admired this woman, maybe not in the right way. And when he comes to Uthman, Uthman says, you come into my presence, but I find the marks of adultery showing in your eyes. Do you not know that adultery of the eyes is the look? So Anas bin Malik, Uthman tell him, so repent or I shall punish you. Anas bin Malik says, are you telling to me that there is a revelation after the Prophet? What are you telling me? Why are you saying this to me? So Uthman says, no, there's no revelation of the Prophet, because Uthman is now telling him, I'm going to punish you for your look. And Anas bin Malik knows there is no punishment for the look. There's only penalty for adultery. So he said, no, there is no revelation. There's no new revelation, but he says, but there is mental perception. There is basira. There is burhan. There's inference. And there is firasa sadiqa. And there's true natural insight, right? These are the elements that go with it. There's another story of Abu Sa'id al-Kharraz, who says that he comes into the sacred mosque, into the holy mosque, and he sees a man, tattered clothes and so on, and he began to have this idea that this kind of man and his type, they're just a burden, they're just a burden on the people and upon humankind. In the same way that we will look at someone who lives on the street, a homeless person, and so on and so forth. And he says that suddenly he heard this man tell him, وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَعْلَمُ مَا فِي أَنفُسِكُمْ فَاحْذُرُوهُ. That man who he looked upon in this derogatory vision, with this derogatory attitude, this man reminded them, and know that Allah knows what is in your soul. So this man, so be wary, فَاحْذُرُوهُ, so be wary of Allah. And Kharra said, I repented in my sir. I repented in my sir. The book again has a bad translation that I asked God forgiveness secretly, that the author didn't get it right here. I repented in the core of my heart. The sir, I'll explain in the next slide, that the sir is that aspect of a very special dimension of the heart. I'll explain it in a minute. So I repented in the core of my heart, from the bottom of my heart. I repented with my purest heart, he says. And then he said, the man then said to him, وَهُوَ الَّذِي يَقْبَلُ التَّوْبَةَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ. That Allah is the one who, from Surah Shura, that he is the one who accepts repentance from servants and pardons his sins. And the man walked away. He never saw him again. So this is the people who have knowledge of the heart. The hearts can also then communicate. You have firasa, you have this insight, this basira. And the sir, also known as the sarira, the plural is sarair. It's a complex story, but I'll make it simple here. It is a highly perceptive heart. That is what's called the sir. And Kharraz was a great Sufi. So he said, I ask for forgiveness from my pure heart, from my perceptive heart. And you get your heart turns into a sir when the ruh is unshackled from the gloom of the soul, because the soul, the nafs carries you down. As you know, the nafs can be, mutma'inna. It can be in a perfect state of tranquility, but in most states you are fighting with your nafs. You're fighting with your soul. The soul either pulls you down or you are always lamenting your soul, right? Now, when the heart is when the ruh is unshackled from the gloom of the soul, in other words, the soul becomes full of light, then the heart is then illuminated and the heart becomes more pure. In other words, your soul becomes more pure. At that stage, we call that the sir. And I think it is what we call, in my understanding, the conscience. And Ghalib has an interesting line. Jamia, if you can just on that link there, go to 2 minutes 2:2, and then you can play it there. But Ghalib said, "Aate hai ghaib se ye mazameen khayal mein, Ghalib sarir khama nawaya sorosh hai." Ghalib, that I spoke to you last week about, Ghalib says that these ideas from the unseen come to me. He's a poet. Who gets these ideas? Poets, wise people, saints, prophets, they get this insight. Aate hai ghaib se ye mazameen khayal mein, Ghalib sarir khama nawaya sorosh hai. The screech of the pen, Ghalib is a poet, he writes, the screech of the pen, O Ghalib, is actually the melody of the angel of revelation. The screech of the pen is actually the melody of the angel of revelation, or is the divine. Can you play it, Jamia, if you don't mind, at 2:22?
I'm not clear where the link is.
It's there on with the picture.
Oh, sorry, in the picture.
Yes. Okay, if you can't, that's fine. I don't know if you can get it. I'm trying this for the first time, so forget it if you can't get it.
There doesn't seem to be.
Okay, that's fine. I can sing it for you also, but I don't think my voice is that good. Aate hai ghaib se, Jagjit sings that. Aate hai ghaib se ye mazameen khayal mein, Ghalib sarir khama nawaya sarosh hai. At that point, I will entertain your questions or your comments.
Shukran, Professor. Where is Imam Rashid here?
I am here, yeah. Shukran. Thank you so much, Ebrahim.
Wait, let me 1 second. I can play it for you. Sorry.
That might be a good way to end it.
If you're into sports betting and you want to win, you have to download this app called BetQ.
Can you hear it? That's the only line I wanted to share. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ibrahim.
Yeah. If anybody had questions, I'm happy to entertain those questions, Imam Rashid. I don't know what your time is like.
Yes, I think we have a time problem because it's Maghrib is getting earlier here.
Okay, good.
So I'm going to end by thanking you, but I've on behalf of the Claremont Main Road Masjid, I've also got a special surprise for you. So I'm going to ask Saida Isop to do the vote of thanks. Saida, are you there?
I'm here, Imam.
Oh, yes. Oh, this is Shaida, I know. Oh, my goodness.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum, Professor Moosa.
Walaikum salam.
Let me start. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May the peace, mercy, and blessings of Allah be with you. It is indeed an honor and a privilege afforded to me today on behalf of the board, Imams Shahid and Rashid and Shahid, and our participants, to thank you, Professor Ebrahim Moosa, for sacrificing precious time to do this amazing workshop on Imam Muhammad al-Ghazali's Wonders of the Heart for the Claremont Main Road Masjid. Most importantly, you offered us a vehicle of understanding through Imam al-Ghazali's Wonders of the Heart, a ray of hope within the grim and dire circumstances of the affairs of our present-day world, especially the Middle East, South Africa, and the world over. The message is clear, though. I quote Imam al-Ghazali, "We have to constantly challenge ourselves to unveil ourselves mystically to attain nearness to God," unquote. Knowledge that will bring us closer to God in this world and to enable us to change our circumstances and contribute sincerely to the creation of a just and a peaceful world for all of God's creation. I'm sure that most of the participants are experts on al-Ghazali, but for me, who previously read it only at bedtime, and I have to quote Imam Rashid here. He said last week, "It is no bedtime reader," unquote. And I agree wholeheartedly with Imam. It was an educational experience, a glimpse into the mind of Imam al-Ghazali, and I'm sure a tug-of-war ensued between us and Imam al-Ghazali to unravel the essence of the wonders of the heart. Professor Moosa, thank you for taking the time to unravel painstakingly, passionately, and dissect word for word and sentence upon sentence of wonders of the heart, without a glimpse of irritation. Ultimately, we are all searching for equilibrium and a discerning and caring heart for the love of Allah. The Buddha believed that wisdom arises only through effort, and when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Once again, thank you, and we pray that you will kindly consider soon enough to take time off to offer us more workshops. Jazakallahu khairan, and may the Almighty Allah bless you and your family plentifully. Finally, I would also like to thank the board and especially Imam Rashid Omar and Jamia for your foresight, hard work in arranging the workshops and nasihas with exceptional guests. We are a tiny masjid with a huge heart, offering a ray of hope to those who are seeking sincere knowledge. Shukran kathiran to all. May the Almighty bless you all with love, good health, safety, inshallah Allah. Shukran.
Thank you so much, Sister Saida. And we we go back a long way. My grandfather and your father were good friends, and so was my great grandfather. So it's a great honor that you gave the vote of thanks, and that is just thank you. It's very moving, and thank you to Imam Rashid and to all the people gathered here today for their wonderful wonderful discussion that we had, and I learned a lot from all of you, and thank you once again. And Ramadan Mubarak and Eid Mubarak whenever that occurs for you in that part of the world.
Shukran, Ebrahim. Please join me in the final dua. We pray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us. ربنا زدنا علما وارزقنا فهما. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا.
Ameen.
Oh Allah, thou art the pardoner and the forgiver. Thou loves to pardon and to forgive. We beseech you, Ya Allah, pardon and forgive us our many human indiscretions by your merciful grace. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما.
اللهم صل
اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى سيدنا محمد وأصحابه وبارك وسلم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين.
الحمد لله.
شكرا.